the arrival and the message. The vast darkness of space rippled with light as hundreds of warships emerged from hyperspace. The Krell Dominion fleet stretched across the void like a constellation of death, each vessel bristling with weapons that had reduced countless worlds to silence. At the heart of this armada sat the Sovereign's fist, a dreadnought so massive it could blot out suns from the surface of planets. It approached. Commander Vaith stood on the observation deck, his silver-scaled hands clasped behind his back. His species had evolved on a world of endless oceans, and his body reflected that heritage. Gills fluttered slightly at his neck, processing the ship's atmosphere, while his large, dark eyes reflected the blue-green planet growing larger in the viewscreen. Earth, the 73rd world, marked for integration into the Dominion. The commander's second officer. Kellis approached with a datapad in hand. She was younger than Vaith, her scales still showing the bright patterns of youth. Her enthusiasm for conquest had not yet been dulled by the routine of it all. "Commander, the preliminary scans are complete," Kellis reported, her voice carrying the musical quality of their language. "The inhabitants call themselves humans. They achieved spaceflight only recently, barely reaching their own moon. No orbital defenses detected, no energy shields. Their most advanced weapons are crude fusion devices that could harm their own planet, but pose no threat to our fleet." Faith nodded slowly, feeling a familiar disappointment settle in his chest. He had been conquering worlds for 3 decades, and each new campaign felt more hollow than the last. The Krell had once been explorers, seeking knowledge and friendship among the stars. But that was before the Great Scarcity, before resources became more valuable than relationships. Now they took what they needed from those too weak to defend it. "Population?" Vaith asked. "Approximately 8 billion, divided into numerous tribal groups they call nations. They fight among themselves frequently, which should make subjugation easier. A divided enemy is a defeated enemy." The commander walked closer to the view screen, studying the planet that hung before them like a jewel. White clouds swirled over blue oceans and green-brown continents. From this distance, it looked peaceful, beautiful even. He wondered if the humans below had any idea what was coming for them. "Broadcast the standard compliance directive," Vaith ordered. "All frequencies, all languages. They have 48 hours to respond." The communications team worked with practice efficiency. Within the hour, every radio, television, satellite, and communication device on Earth received the same message. It was translated into over 6,000 human languages simultaneously, ensuring no one could claim ignorance. The message was simple and absolute. The Krell Dominion had arrived. Humanity was to cease all military activities immediately, gather their leaders at designated coordinates, and prepare for integration into the Dominion. Resistance would result in selective orbital strikes. Continued resistance would result in complete planetary sterilization. They had 48 hours. On Earth, the message shattered the illusion of humanity's place in the universe. World leaders were pulled from sleep into emergency sessions. Military commanders stared at radar screens, showing hundreds of contacts in orbit, each one larger than an aircraft carrier. Scientists worked frantically to verify that this was not an elaborate hoax. Citizens everywhere stopped what they were doing, looking up at the sky with a mixture of terror and wonder. In Geneva, Switzerland, the Global Response Council convened in an underground facility built during the Cold War. Representatives from every major nation gathered around a circular table, their faces projected on screens where they could not attend in person. At the head of the table sat Dr. Sarah Chin, a linguist and anthropologist who had spent her career studying human communication and culture. She had been appointed as humanity's spokesperson, though no one was quite sure what that meant yet. "We cannot fight them," General Marcus Steele from the United States stated flatly. "Our weapons are designed for terrestrial combat. We have nothing that can reach orbit with enough force to damage ships that size." "Surrender is not acceptable," countered Ambassador Okonkwo from the African Union. "We know nothing about these Krell, what they want, what they will do to us. We cannot simply hand over our entire species." Dr. Chen listened to the arguments spiral in circles. Fear, anger, desperation. Every voice in the room represented millions of people looking for answers, for hope, for some way out of the impossible situation. She looked down at her notes, pages filled with observations about the Krell message. The language patterns, the assumptions embedded in their ultimatum, the fact that they had bothered to communicate at all. They are expecting us to react in a certain way, Dr. Chen said quietly. The room gradually fell silent as others noticed she was speaking. Their message assumes we will either fight uselessly or surrender immediately. Those are the only two responses they have prepared for. What other option is there? Someone asked. Dr. Chen looked up, her eyes sharp with an idea that had been forming since the moment she heard the Krell ultimatum. We give them what they are not expecting. We tell them who we are. The confusion in the room was palpable. General Steele leaned forward. Explain. They have scanned our planet, our technology, our military capabilities. They think they know us, but they only know what we can do. They do not know who we are. They do not know what we have survived, what we have endured, what we have learned. Dr. Chen stood, her voice gaining strength. We send them everything. Our entire history, every war we have fought, every plague we have survived, every time we have faced extinction and clawed our way back, every mistake we have made and learned from. We show them that humanity does not break easily, because we have spent 10,000 years learning how to bend. You want to send them our military history? Ambassador Okonkwo asked, incredulous. That would give them every advantage. They already have every advantage, Dr. Chen countered. But advantages mean nothing if you do not understand your enemy. We make them understand. We make them see that conquering Earth will not be like any conquest they have attempted before. Not because we are stronger, but because we are survivors. And survivors are dangerous. The debate lasted for hours, but eventually a consensus formed. They had no weapons that could touch the Krell fleet. They had no defenses that could withstand orbital bombardment, but they had information. And information could be a weapon if wielded correctly. Within 24 hours, humanity's response began transmitting. The Krell fleet's communication arrays lit up with incoming data, terabytes every second, pabytes every hour. The computers struggled to process the sheer volume of information. Kellis was the first to notice something was wrong. Commander, we are receiving a response from the humans, but it is not what we expected. Vaith entered the communication center to find every screen filled with scrolling data. What is this? It appears to be historical records, sir. Military conflicts, medical journals, philosophical treatises, artistic works. They are sending us everything. The commander watched as images flashed across screens. Humans fighting with primitive spears and shields. Cities burning from something called aerial bombardment. Trenches filled with bodies from chemical warfare. The blinding light of nuclear detonation. Each image was accompanied by detailed records, casualty counts, tactical analyses, survivor testimonies, medical treatments developed in response to new horrors. Why are they showing us this? Kellis asked, her scales paling. Are they trying to frighten us? Vaith did not answer immediately. He was reading a document titled The Art of War, written by a human named Sun Tzu over 2,000 years ago. The insights were sophisticated. The strategic thinking advanced despite the primitive technology of the era. Another document detailed something called guerrilla warfare, showing how small groups could resist larger forces indefinitely. Another showed plans for insurgency, for survival under occupation, for maintaining hope when all seemed lost. The data kept coming. Humans had documented everything. Every battle they fought, they analyzed for lessons. Every defeat they suffered, they studied to avoid repeating. Every enemy they faced, they learned from. And there were so many enemies. They had fought each other for their entire history, developing increasingly sophisticated methods of warfare, resistance, and survival. But it was not just military history. They sent literature, thousands of stories about facing impossible odds. They sent films showing aliens invading Earth and humans finding creative ways to win. They sent games where players practiced fighting extraterrestrial threats. They sent music composed in times of desperation that somehow inspired courage. They sent poetry written in concentration camps and war zones, words that refused to surrender even when all else was lost. Commander, there is a message attached, Kellis said, her voice uncertain. The text appeared on the main screen in perfect Krell script. The translation algorithms had worked flawlessly. The message was short, just a few sentences, but they made Vaith's blood run cold. We have received your ultimatum. We understand you have superior technology and greater numbers. We know we cannot win a conventional war, but we want you to understand something before you proceed. We have been practicing. Every war we fought prepared us for the next. Every catastrophe we survived taught us how to endure. Every story we told reminded us that humans do not give up. We remember everything. Every invasion we imagined. Every apocalypse we survived. Every time someone thought we were finished and we proved them wrong. We are not asking you to leave. We are not begging for mercy. We are simply making sure you know exactly what you are choosing to fight. We remember everything. Do you? Faith read the message 3 times. Around him, the communication center had fallen silent. Every officer was staring at the screens, at the endless data still pouring in from Earth. They were watching humans fight and die and survive across thousands of years. They were seeing a species that had made an art form of resilience. "Sir, what do we do?" Kellis asked. The commander looked at the blue planet on the view screen. Somewhere down there, 8 billion humans waited. They knew they could not win, but they were making sure the Krell knew the cost of victory. They were warriors who had been fighting since they learned to make fire, who had turned their own world into a training ground for survival. For the first time in his long career, Commander Vaith was uncertain. The humans had not responded with defiance or surrender. They had responded with a warning wrapped in a history lesson. They were saying, "We know what is coming, and we have been preparing for it our entire existence." "Continue monitoring their transmission," Vaith ordered quietly, "and summon the War Council. We need to discuss this." As he left the communication center, Faith could not shake the feeling that something fundamental had just changed. The Krell had conquered 72 worlds. They had faced species with better technology, larger populations, and fiercer warrior traditions. But they had never faced a species that had spent millennia teaching itself how to survive the unsurvivable. The 48-hour deadline was counting down. But now Vaith was not sure whether humanity was running out of time, or whether the Krill had just made a terrible mistake. The message continued transmitting human history, human creativity, human stubbornness, all wrapped up in a simple declaration: we remember everything. The question that haunted Vaith as he walked the corridors of his ship was equally simple, but far more troubling. What had the Krell forgotten? The understanding and the choice. The War Council chamber aboard the Sovereign's Fist had witnessed countless strategic meetings over the decades. Its circular design allowed all senior officers to face each other as equals, though everyone knew Commander Vaith held final authority. Today, the chamber felt different. The usual confidence that preceded a conquest was absent, replaced by an uncomfortable uncertainty that none of the assembled officers wanted to acknowledge. Vaith stood at the center, a holographic projection of Earth rotating slowly above his palm. Around him sat 12 of his most experienced commanders, each one responsible for a section of the fleet. They had conquered worlds together, celebrated victories together, and mourned losses together, but they had never looked quite so unsettled. The human transmission concluded 6 hours ago. Faith began, his voice measured. "Our analytical systems have processed the data. Intelligence Officer Dren, your assessment." Dren was old, even by Krell standards. His scales faded to a dull silver that spoke of many years. He had studied alien psychology for half a century, helping the Dominion understand and predict the behavior of conquered species. He looked troubled as he activated his own holographic display. "Commander, I must confess that the human response is unprecedented in my experience. They have provided us with approximately 47 PB of data, covering roughly 12,000 years of recorded history. The content is deeply concerning." Dren paused, choosing his words carefully. "These humans are extraordinarily violent, but not in the way we typically encounter. Most species we conquer have warrior castes or military traditions. Humans have industrialized warfare. They have made it a science." Another officer, Commander Thrace, spoke up. Her scales bore the scars of actual combat, rare among modern Krell, who typically commanded from orbit. "Surely their primitive weapons cannot threaten our fleet. I have reviewed their military capabilities. Ballistic projectiles, chemical explosives, crude atomic weapons. Nothing that can reach us. That is not what concerns me. Dren replied quietly. He pulled up images from the human transmission. A city in ruins, its inhabitants continuing to resist despite impossible odds. This is what they call Stalingrad, a battle during their Second World War. The defenders were surrounded, outgunned, outnumbered, and facing complete annihilation. By all military logic, they should have surrendered immediately. Instead, they fought for over 5 months. They turned every building into a fortress, every street into a battlefield. The attackers had superior equipment and numbers, but the defenders understood something crucial. They understood that time itself could be a weapon. Vaith leaned forward. Explain. Every day that city held out was a day the enemy's resources were committed to that single location. Every soldier killed, there was one less soldier available elsewhere. Every hour of combat in winter conditions weakened the enemy's ability to fight. The defenders did not need to win. They only needed to make victory too expensive. Dren switched to another image, this one showing jungle terrain. Or consider their conflict in Vietnam, a technologically superior force with complete air superiority, advanced weapons, and overwhelming firepower faced an enemy that should have been crushed within months. Instead, the war lasted years and ended with the superior force withdrawing. You are saying they will resist, Kellis observed. I am saying they have spent their entire existence learning how to resist, Dren corrected. But there is something more troubling. He pulled up documents written in dozens of human languages. These are instruction manuals, guides for resistance movements, handbooks for survival under occupation, detailed analyses of successful insurgencies throughout their history. They have documented everything that works against a superior occupying force, and they have made this information freely available to their entire population. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled over them. One of the younger commanders, Sarah, spoke what others were thinking. Then we simply sterilize the planet from orbit. If they cannot be conquered effectively, we eliminate them and harvest the resources without resistance. That would violate Dominion law, Vaith said sharply. We are conquerors, not exterminators. The Dominion requires living populations to maintain conquered worlds, to work the facilities we establish, to eventually integrate into our empire. A dead world serves no purpose. Then we face an extended occupation against an enemy that has literally written books about how to make occupation impossible, Thrace said flatly. She gestured at the holographic displays showing human history. Look at these records. They have been invaded countless times throughout their history. Sometimes the invaders won, sometimes they lost. But in every single case, the humans learned something. They studied what worked and what did not. They passed that knowledge down through generations. We would be facing 8 billion individuals who have inherited 12,000 years of resistance tactics. Dren cleared his throat. There is another aspect we must consider. I have been reviewing their philosophical works, their literature, their cultural productions. Humans have a concept they call underdog stories. These are narratives, often fictional but sometimes historical, where a weaker party overcomes a stronger opponent. These stories are extraordinarily popular in human culture. They appear in every society, every era, every medium of communication. Stories, Sarah scoffed. What do children's tales matter? Because they reveal what a species believes about itself, Faith said quietly. He had been reading some of the same material, and it had shaken something deep within him. These stories are not just entertainment. They are instruction manuals for hope. They teach humans that impossible situations can be overcome through creativity, courage, and persistence. They grow up believing that being the underdog is not a disadvantage, but rather a position from which great victories emerge. Dren nodded, grateful that the commander understood precisely. And they do not just tell these stories. They believe them. When we arrive, we will not just be facing their military. We will be facing 8 billion individuals who have been culturally conditioned since childhood to believe they can defeat us. The council chamber grew heavy with troubled silence. These were experienced military commanders who had seen countless battles, but this was different. They were beginning to understand that the humans had turned them into villains in a story. And in human stories, villains usually lost. Vaith dimmed the holographic displays and walked to the viewing port. The blue planet hung in space, beautiful and seemingly vulnerable. "There is something else I discovered in their transmission," he said softly. "Something I believe they wanted us to find." Intelligence Officer Dren, pull up the file labeled Krell Resonance. Confusion rippled through the council. Dren worked his console, and then his eyes widened. "Commander, this is a historical document about our own species. How did they obtain this?" Kelleris demanded. "They did not obtain it," Vaith replied. "They deduced it. They analyzed our language patterns, our ship designs, our communication protocols. They compared it to their own historical data and drew conclusions." "Read it, Dren." The old intelligence officer's voice wavered as he read. "The Krell Dominion demonstrates characteristics consistent with a post-scarcity crisis civilization. Their technology suggests they were once explorers and scientists, rather than conquerors. Their ship naming conventions include words that translate to harmony, discovery, and friendship. Yet, they arrive as invaders. This implies a fundamental change in their civilization, likely triggered by resource depletion. They conquer not from cruelty, but from desperation. They have forgotten who they were, and become what they needed to survive." The silence that followed was profound. Vaith could feel the discomfort radiating from his officers. The humans had looked at the Krell Dominion and seen through them completely. They had identified the wound at the heart of Krell civilization. "They are correct," Faith said quietly. "I have been reviewing our own historical records, files that most of us have never accessed. 30 years ago, the Krell were explorers. We built ships to seek out new life, to share knowledge, to establish friendships across the stars. Then the great scarcity began. Our home system's resources depleted faster than we could develop alternatives. We made a choice. We could maintain our principles and slowly die, or we could abandon those principles and take what we needed from others. We chose survival." Commander Thrace stood abruptly. "And we have survived." "That choice, however painful, was necessary." "Was it?" Vaith asked, turning to face his officers. 72 worlds conquered, dozens of species enslaved or eliminated. And what have we gained? Enough resources to continue conquering. We have become a machine that feeds itself, forgetting why we started this path in the first place." "The humans are making you doubt," Sarah accused. "This is exactly what they intended. Their transmission is psychological warfare designed to weaken our resolve." "Perhaps," Vaith acknowledged. "But what if they are offering us something else? What if they are holding up a mirror?" He activated the holographic display again. But this time, he showed a specific section of the human transmission. It was a collection of historical examples where invading forces had been absorbed or transformed by the cultures they conquered. Romans becoming Christians, Mongols adopting Chinese administration, conquerors becoming the conquered through culture rather than combat. The humans included this section deliberately. Faith continued. "They are showing us their history of resistance. Yes, but they are also showing us another possibility. They are suggesting that we remember who we were before we became conquerors. They are offering us a chance to return to our principles without losing face, without admitting weakness." "You are suggesting we withdraw?" Thrace asked incredulously. "After assembling this entire fleet, after making demands, we would be laughed at across the galaxy. Or we would be respected," Dren said slowly, his ancient eyes seeing something the others had missed. "The humans sent us a message within their message. They said we remember everything, and then asked, 'Do you?' They were not just warning us about their capability to resist. They were asking if we remember who we were before fear made us into this." Vaith felt the weight of command pressing down on him like never before. Every officer in this room had families depending on the resources these conquests provided. The entire Dominion economy had been built on expansion. Stopping now would require fundamental changes, painful adjustments, acknowledging that they had been wrong. But the alternative was landing on that blue planet and fighting 8 billion humans who had spent their entire existence preparing for exactly this scenario. It would be a victory, perhaps, but at what cost? How many Krell would die conquering a species that had industrialized resistance? And what would the Krell become in the process of that conquest? "I am calling for a vote," Vaith announced. The council members stirred in surprise. Commanders did not call votes on conquest decisions. All those who believe we should proceed with the invasion of Earth as planned. 3 hands rose. Sarah, as expected, and 2 others who were too invested in the conquest system to imagine an alternative. All those who believe we should withdraw the fleet and open diplomatic channels with humanity instead. 9 hands rose, including Old Dren and scarred Thrace. Kellis hesitated, then slowly raised her hand as well, making it 10. Vaith felt something shift in his chest, a weight he had been carrying for decades beginning to lift. Then we are agreed. Prepare a message to Earth. Tell them we withdraw our ultimatum. Tell them we wish to establish communication as equals rather than conquerors. The High Command will demand explanations, one officer warned. Let them demand, Vaith replied. I will tell them the truth. We encountered a species that showed us who we used to be and offered us a chance to become that again. We chose to remember. The message was transmitted within the hour. On Earth, the response was initially disbelief, then cautious celebration, then careful diplomatic engagement. The Crow fleet did not leave immediately, but repositioned to demonstrate peaceful intent. Contact protocols were established. Translation matrices were refined. Slowly, carefully, 2 species began to talk rather than fight. In the months that followed, the story of what happened at Earth spread across the galaxy. Some species mocked the Krill for their weakness. Others were inspired by their choice. But everyone agreed on one thing. Humanity had won a victory without firing a shot, simply by making an enemy remember what they had forgotten. Dr. Sarah Chen would later write about that moment in history, about how a single message changed not just the fate of Earth, but potentially the trajectory of galactic civilization. She would note that sometimes the most powerful weapon is not technology or numbers, but rather the ability to help others see themselves clearly. Commander Vaith returned to the Krell homeworld to face questions and criticism, but he also found others who had been quietly uncomfortable with the path their civilization had taken. His choice at Earth became a catalyst for change, slow and painful, but genuine. Years later, when the Krell and humans had established true friendship, Faith attended a ceremony on Earth. He stood with Dr. Chen, looking up at the night sky, where Krell and human ships now traveled together. Not as conqueror and conquered, but as partners. We almost destroyed each other, Vaith said quietly. But we didn't, Dr. Chen replied. Because we both chose to remember. You remembered who you were before fear. We remembered that strength is not just about winning fights, but about giving others a chance to be better. Your message saved both our species. No, Dr. Chen corrected gently. Your choice did. We just reminded you that you had one. In the end, that was what changed everything. Not weapons or threats or superior technology. Just a message that said, we see you, we understand you, and we believe you can be better than this. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough. The galaxy would never be quite the same. Because one species refused to give up, and another remembered what it meant to choose principle over expedience. Because a message traveled through space, carrying not just data, but hope. Because sometimes, the greatest victories are the ones where everyone wins. Earth remained free. The Krell remembered themselves. And across the stars, other species looked at what happened and wondered if they too might choose differently. One message, endless consequences. Everything had changed.